Hello, Dawn Moore. Today I want to answer a question that I am repeatedly asked about the seller's disclosure notice. When a contract terminates and the buyer gives the seller a copy of the inspection report, is the seller then obligated to disclose defects shown on that report to a subsequent buyer? My answer to that question is emphatically yes. And then how should that be disclosed? My suggestion then is to amend the existing seller's disclosure notice, adding the inspection report saying, "See attached inspection report dated such and such, a copy of which is attached." That way the seller doesn't inadvertently leave something off the disclosure that may be contained in the inspection report. Then I'm asked, well, isn't the inspection report the property of the buyer and run only to the benefit of the buyer? I remind you that once the inspection report is released to the seller by the buyer, it becomes property of the seller. The seller can and must disclose defects shown on that report. Inevitably, the question progresses into, what if the inspection report is bad because the inspector is an idiot? My response to that? Well, the problem is, he's a licensed idiot. A seller cannot avoid disclosing defects because he thinks that the inspector was incompetent. The only way to combat a bad inspection report is to get another inspection report from a licensed inspector with whom you have more confidence. Then I suggest you disclose both inspection reports. Some sellers' agents try to avoid getting inspection reports if the buyer is going to terminate under the option period. Unfortunately, sometimes when a buyer terminates, they simply mention the defect or defects that cause them to terminate the contract. Unfortunately, once the buyer mentions simply orally the defect, the seller is put on notice of a defect and the seller must disclose. Disclosing in the general is sometimes more dangerous than disclosing in the specific. I suggest you get an inspection report from the buyer so that you can disclose in the specifics. Clearly, I'm a firm believer of full disclosure and know it is in the best interest of the seller to disclose all defects that they know exist on the property. Let the buyer then inspect the property with an inspector of their own choice, having the information that you give them, and let them rely on that inspection. I hope this is of help to you and best wishes in your continued success. Please let Allegiance be your resource for results. Thank you.